Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Right, what I'd like to talk about is what I personally choose as my loadout for sleeping when I go out into the bush during winter. Everybody has their own opinion, but I would say this is a minimum. Now, one thing about going out into the bush, to the forest, to the wilderness during winter, even if you're just going for a day hike, you have to be prepared that it can last for a lot longer period. If a blizzard comes in, you break your ankle, something unexpected happens, your car gets snowed in, for example, the roads get blocked, you may have to spend quite a few nights sleeping out. If you don't have the right equipment, you will get hypothermia, you will get frostbite, you may even die. Now, winter equipment is very different to summer equipment because of the weight. It's a lot heavier. First of all, we'll talk about sleeping bag. As I stated in an earlier video, sleeping bags are not quite what they describe themselves as. This is a Scandika, and this is ripstop with 2 layers of flannel, 250 gram layering with a 250 gram hollow fibre, 2 layers, 230T polyester honeycomb ripstop, water resistant, and it's got brushed cotton flannel lining. It should be toasty, it really should. The extreme conditions: 0 degrees for comfort, -10 for limit, that's important, -25 extreme. This is centigrade. When you see -25, it doesn't actually mean -25. -25 is if you were wearing 15 layers of clothing and wrapped up into a tight little ball inside your bag for about half an hour or an hour. That's it. It is literally the last resort. The limit is a bit more honest. In this case, -10. But even -10, you would still need to be fully dressed with multiple layers of clothing inside the sleeping bag, inside something else. Be aware that this will only cover you to a modicum of what the temperature actually says. I'd say somewhere between 0, which is comfort, and 10, which is the limit. So I'd say about -5 degrees. -25 is last chance survival, fully dressed, in a ball, inside the bag for about an hour. And this applies across all sleeping bags. The real value of the sleeping bag is somewhere between comfort and limit. That being said, out here I've experienced below -30. Anything below -10 is hardcore. Like I said in an earlier video, your nostril hairs freeze. -20, if you're exposed for a few minutes, your skin starts burning and will eventually lead to frostbite. So imagine you go out for a nice walk. It's about -1, -2, beautiful sunny day. You're up in the hills, trudging through the snow. Suddenly a blizzard comes in, and if you've ever been in a whiteout, you literally cannot see anything. The Long Dark video game does this very well. In a whiteout, it is literally white. You cannot see in front of you. Basically what you do is you hunker down and try and cover yourself and wait for it to finish. If you're lucky, you may find shelter next to a hedgerow or a wall. Worst condition, you pull out something from your equipment you're carrying with you and you get inside it. In this case, this is why I recommend a Gore-Tex Bivvy Bag. This was given to me by John from JP Outdoors, another fine present from that young man. This is a British military issue Gore-Tex Bivvy Bag. This, I believe, raises the temperature range of a sleeping bag by 5 or 10, plus 5 or 10 centigrade. So it means you can have more extremes. So say this is between -5, -10, it means I could do -10, -15. But the bivvy bag is a vital piece of equipment. It's not that heavy. I think this weighs maybe half a kilogram. And this is what you quickly pull out of your bag and climb inside, cover it up and sit there and wait for the blizzard to finish. Obviously, if you're dealing with avalanche conditions, that's something else entirely. Avalanche, you have to know which way down to face. You put your head down, your legs up, and let the avalanche ride on top of you, so you can theoretically tunnel your way out. In a normal whiteout, you just hunker down inside your bivvy bag, close it over, obviously with some air, and wait. You're not going to have a chance to get your sleeping bag out. Also, you'll get it wet, and you really don't want to get your sleeping bag wet. Bivvy bag, ideal. Getting back to the limits of the sleeping bag, one good option is to bring a Microlight sleeping bag along with you. Obviously this weighs much less. This says it actually weighs 0.9 of a kilo, so it is starting to add up. Plus this little sleeping bag has an extreme rating of 0.2. On its own, this will not help you. It's not going to do much at all under these conditions, but it's about layering. You get inside this, inside your winter sleeping bag, and you've created an extra layer of warm air. This really helps. This is the sort of thing I carry with me on my motorbike in the summer, or if we go to a club event, you can just climb inside it and sleep. In winter it's useless, but inside a winter sleeping bag you again add another 5 or 10 degrees, because basically what you're trying to do is just increase the limit, the negative range that you can survive under. Obviously, having some form of protection from the ground, some insulation, is essential. This is a yoga mat. I find this very useful because it's very thick, and it also has sort of an eggshell, an egg carton shape, which does trap the air. You have this underneath you. You cannot sleep straight on the ground. Your body will absorb all the cold air, and the ground will suck all the heat from you. One possibility is by having some sort of a thin aluminium mat, anything really, even a blanket, just to keep you separate from the ground. If you have time, you can use pine boughs, thick layers of pine boughs. If you ever watch people going for hardcore survival camps and building their own shelters, they will often have several feet deep of spruce boughs or pine boughs as their bedding to keep them away from the floor. If you're using a hammock, and I've got into the hammock system, a good hammock now will have an openable layer between where you lie and the exterior, and inside this layer you could put some sort of insulation. You could put a wool blanket, you can put a Mylar blanket, because again your back is exposed. It's to protect heat loss from your back. Mylar Blanket you should be carrying with you at all times anyway. This is your basic survival tool. You wrap it around you and it reflects heat, your own body heat, back towards you. That's all it does. It's not a blanket, it doesn't warm you up, it reflects heat and theoretically reflects the cold away. If you're in real dire situation, you wrap yourself in this, you get inside this, which gets inside this, which gets inside this. Multiple layers. I also suggest bringing an inflatable pillow because it keeps your head off the ground. Lots of people suggest just bringing a pillow case, like a cotton one, and stuffing their jumper in it, but from experience, when it's really cold, you want to be putting on every layer you can, every extra jumper you can. You're not going to waste it on a pillow. And also, if you have it as a pillow, it will get wet. And it's very hard to dry things out in the wild. So this is what I recommend this is my own personal suggestion for a sleeping kit for day or weekend camps. Obviously, if you're going for longer term, I suggest investing in a much better sleeping bag. One thing to bear in mind, the more waterproof your kit is, the more likely you are to sweat and create condensation, which in extreme cold situations has an adverse effect because the condensation will then freeze. You will get wet from basically your own sweat and you will freeze. So you never want to be 100% waterproof. It has to be breathable. Don't buy the cheapest equipment, which is generally plastic or 100% polyester with no breathability. Always get what you can afford, as much as you can afford, because your life depends on it. You may see it now as a waste of money, but when you're out there in a whiteout and you realise you're going to have to hunker down for 3 days, you're going to really see it as a valuable investment. Don't buy the cheap stuff. You don't have to buy the extreme amounts. I love some of that equipment, some of the Arctic expedition equipment, or even some of the Scandinavian stuff. But from my own personal experience, living in the Carpathian mountains, spending 3 or 4 months, sometimes 5 months per year in sub-zero conditions, this is what I'd recommend.